The soft glow of evening lights illuminated Ella Morgan's face as she navigated the busy streets of downtown Boston. At 34, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was. Her beige cardigan and comfortable shoes reflected her practical nature rather than her financial status. Tonight was special. After 14 years of marriage to tech innovator Nathaniel Nate Cole, Ella was planning a surprise for their anniversary. Nate had been working relentlessly on launching his new sustainable energy platform, and she wanted to reserve a table at the Crystal Palace, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. This was the same place where they'd had their first date, back when Nate was just a promising engineer with big dreams, and Ella was teaching art at the community center. Ella checked her watch. Perfect timing. She had just finished her weekly pottery class at the local studio, clay still faintly visible beneath her fingernails. She hadn't planned to dress up yet. The reservation was for next week, but today she simply wanted to secure it in person, knowing how difficult it was to get a table there. The restaurant came into view, an elegant building with golden light spilling onto the sidewalk. Through the large windows, Ella could see crystal chandeliers hanging from ornate ceilings, illuminating tables draped in pristine white cloth where Boston's elite dined in their finest attire. Taking a deep breath, Ella pushed open the heavy glass door. Isabel West, the maitre d', stood at her station, immaculately dressed in a tailored black suit. Isabel's eyes swept over Ella, narrowing slightly at her casual appearance. "Good evening," Ella said warmly. "I'd like to make a reservation for next Friday, if possible." Isabel's expression remained professionally neutral, though her tone carried a hint of dismissal. "I'm afraid we're fully booked for the next 3 months, madam." Ella Sonrio, indomitable. "I understand how busy you must be. It's for a special anniversary, and this place means a lot to my husband and me." Before Isabel could respond, a man in an expensive suit approached the desk. Ella recognized Sebastian Clark, a local real estate developer known for his flashy lifestyle and regular appearances in Boston's social pages. "Isabel, my usual table isn't prepared properly," Sebastian complained, not bothering to acknowledge Ella's presence. "And I specifically requested the 82 Bordeaux to be ready." "Right away, Mr. Clark," Isabel responded, her demeanor instantly transforming to attentive deference. Sebastian finally glanced at Ella, his eyes making a quick dismissive assessment. He leaned toward Isabel, speaking in a stage whisper, clearly meant to be overheard. "I thought this establishment had standards. Since when do we let just anyone walk in off the street?" Isabel cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Sir, I was just explaining that we're fully booked." Ella felt a flush creep up her neck, but maintained her composure. "As I was saying, it would be for our anniversary. Perhaps I could speak with the manager about any possible—" "Listen," Sebastian interrupted, turning to face her directly. "This isn't some casual diner. People wait months for reservations. They dress appropriately." He gestured toward her clay-stained jeans with distaste. Ella straightened her shoulders. "I understand the restaurant's prestige, sir. I'm only trying to make a reservation for next week, not dine tonight." Sebastian snorted. "Isabel, please handle this situation. My guests are waiting." As Sebastian walked away, Ella noticed several diners watching the exchange with interest, some with thinly veiled amusement. She turned back to Isabel, determined to complete her task despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "I apologize for the interruption," Ella said, maintaining her dignity. "As I was saying about the reservation," Isabel cut her off with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps I wasn't clear, madam. We simply don't have availability." Ella reached into her purse. I understand this is a prestigious establishment. I'm prepared to place a deposit if that would help secure a table. Isabel held up her hand. It's not a matter of deposits, she said, her voice lowering. The Crystal Palace caters to a certain clientele. We have standards to maintain. The implication hung in the air between them. Ella felt her cheeks burn, not from embarrassment now, but from indignation. I see, Ella replied evenly, and those standards are based on appearance, not character. Isabel's expression hardened. Madam, perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the bistros down the street. They're quite lovely and more accommodating to casual diners. From his table, Sebastian watched the exchange with undisguised satisfaction. He raised his voice just enough to be heard by nearby tables. Some people simply don't understand their place. This isn't a soup kitchen. A few patrons chuckled, emboldening the restaurant's female manager, Catherine Blackwell, who had been observing from nearby. She approached with the confidence of someone accustomed to handling difficult situations. Is there a problem here, Isabel? She asked, her gaze fixed critically on Ella. This woman was just leaving, Isabel replied smoothly. Ella stood her ground. Actually, I was trying to make a reservation for a special occasion. My husband and I— Madam, Catherine interrupted, her tone condescending. I must ask you to leave. You're disturbing our guests. Ella looked around, bewildered. I'm simply trying to make a reservation. How is that disturbing anyone? Sebastian chimed in again from his table. Some people need to be told twice. Apparently, Catherine moved closer, lowering her voice to a threatening whisper. Madam, either you leave voluntarily, or I'll be forced to have you escorted out. Ella felt a surge of disbelief. This couldn't actually be happening. Was this how you treat all potential customers, or just the ones who don't arrive in designer clothes? As she reached the doorway, Ella turned to look at the manager. You've made a mistake. The only mistake, Catherine replied coldly, was allowing you through the door in the first place. Thomas, the young server, held the door open, his eyes downcast, clearly uncomfortable with his role in this public humiliation. As Ella stepped outside into the cool evening air, she pulled out her phone. This wasn't how she had planned to involve Nathaniel in her anniversary surprise, but plans had changed. What she didn't know was that her husband's sleek black Porsche was already turning the corner, heading toward the restaurant. Nathaniel had decided to surprise her after finishing his meeting early, remembering she had mentioned stopping by the Crystal Palace to make their anniversary reservation. The evening air felt unexpectedly cold against Ella's flushed cheeks as she stood outside the Crystal Palace. The humiliation stung, not because she valued the opinion of people who judged her by appearance, but because the injustice was so blatant, so unapologetic. Through the glass doors, she could still see Isabel and Catherine exchanging satisfied glances as if they had successfully protected their precious establishment from an unwanted intruder. Ella's fingers hovered over her phone, about to call Nathaniel, when the distinctive purr of a finely tuned engine caught her attention. A sleek black Porsche 911 glided to a stop directly in front of the restaurant, its polished surface reflecting the golden lights from the entrance. Ella's heartbeat quickened. She would recognize that car anywhere. Inside the Crystal Palace, the smooth operation of exclusive dining continued uninterrupted. Sebastian was regaling his companions with some self-important story, his boisterous laughter carrying across the room. Isabel had returned to her post, while Catherine was personally attending to another well-dressed couple. The restaurant's front door opened again, drawing Isabel's practiced smile, a smile that froze when she saw who entered. Nathaniel Parker stood in the doorway, his tall frame impeccably dressed in a midnight blue tuxedo that exuded quiet wealth. At 40, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. His success spoke for itself. His eyes swept the restaurant with laser-like precision until they found Ella outside on the sidewalk. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, quickly replaced by something harder, more focused. "Good evening," Isabel greeted him, her professional demeanor instantly engaged. "Welcome to the Crystal Palace. Do you have a reservation, sir?" Nathaniel turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I'm meeting my wife." Isabel's smile brightened. "Of course, sir. May I have the name for your reservation?" "Parker," he replied simply. "Nathaniel Parker." The effect was immediate, but subtle. Isabel's smile faltered for just a moment. The name Parker carried weight in Boston's business circles. She quickly recovered, though uncertainty now tinged her confidence. "Mr. Parker," she said, managing to maintain her composure, "I don't believe we have a reservation under that name tonight."
"That's because my wife came to make one," Nathaniel replied, his voice level, but with an edge that made Isabel straighten. "For our anniversary next week. She just stepped out, it seems." Isabel's complexion paled slightly. "Your wife was here? Perhaps you could describe her." Nathaniel's gaze sharpened. "Blonde hair, beige cardigan, probably mentioned our anniversary." The blood drained from Isabel's face as realization dawned. From his table, Sebastian watched the exchange with growing interest, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "Sir, there may have been a misunderstanding," Isabel began, but Nathaniel was already moving past her, opening the door and extending his hand to Ella. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly, as Ella took his hand and stepped back inside. "Not exactly," Ella replied, her voice steady despite the emotional current running beneath. The restaurant had grown oddly quiet, conversations tapering off as patrons sensed the unfolding drama. Catherine approached quickly, having registered that something was amiss at the entrance. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her eyes darting between Nathaniel's unmistakably expensive attire and Ella's casual clothing, mental calculations visibly racing behind her practiced smile. "Yes," Nathaniel said calmly. "I understand my wife was just asked to leave your establishment." Catherine's professional mask slipped for just a second before settling back into place. "There must be some confusion. We have certain standards for our guests." "And standards?" Nathaniel repeated, the word hanging in the air like crystal about to shatter. "What standards exactly would prevent my wife from simply making a reservation?" Ella watched as the restaurant staff's confidence began to crumble. Isabel was now frantically flipping through reservation cards, perhaps hoping to find evidence that she'd somehow accommodated Ella after all. "Sir," Catherine tried again, lowering her voice, "perhaps we could discuss this privately. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "I don't think so," Ella interjected, finding her voice. "You were quite clear about your standards and how I don't meet them." From his table nearby, Sebastian cleared his throat loudly. "The woman is causing a disturbance," he offered, apparently unable to read the changing dynamics of the room. "Some people simply don't know how to behave in establishments of this caliber." Nathaniel turned slowly, taking in Sebastian for the first time. "And you are Richard Clark?" Sebastian replied with evident self-importance. "I'm something of a regular here." "I see," Nathaniel said, his tone deceptively conversational. "And you felt it necessary to involve yourself in how the restaurant treated my wife?" Sebastian's confidence wavered as he finally registered the subtle signs of power and wealth that Nathaniel carried effortlessly, not in flashy displays but in the quiet certainty of his bearing. "Your wife?" Sebastian repeated, his voice losing its authoritative edge. "Yes, Mr. Clark. My wife, Ella Parker." Nathaniel's voice remained calm, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The room seemed to drop several degrees. Co-founder of the Parker Innovation Foundation, board member of the Boston Museum of Modern Art, and the woman who just wanted to make a dinner reservation to celebrate our anniversary at the place where we had our first date. The silence in the restaurant was now absolute. Even the kitchen staff had paused to watch through the service doors. Isabel stood motionless at her station, reservation books still open in her hands. Catherine's professional smile had disappeared entirely. Ella felt no triumph in their discomfort, only sadness at how quickly humans judge one another based on such superficial criteria. "Michael," she said quietly, placing a hand on his arm. "It's okay. Let's just go." But Michael wasn't finished. His gaze remained fixed on Sebastian, who was now shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "You know what fascinates me, Mr. Hammond?" Michael continued. "How often people confuse wealth with worth." The Crystal Palace remained suspended in a charged silence. Every eye was fixed on the tableau near the entrance. Ella in her simple clothes, Michael in his perfect tuxedo, and the restaurant staff caught in a moment of dawning horror. "Mr. Parker," Catherine finally managed, her voice no longer carrying its earlier condescension. "Please accept our most sincere apologies for this terrible misunderstanding. We would be honored to prepare a table for you and Mrs. Parker immediately." Michael's expression didn't change. "A misunderstanding?" He repeated the words hanging in the air. "Is that what we're calling it?" Thomas, the young man who had escorted Ella out, stood nearby, his discomfort palpable. Unlike the others, he seemed genuinely distressed by what had transpired. "Sir?" Isabel interjected, her professional veneer cracking further. "We had no way of knowing who Mrs. Parker was if she had just explained," Thomas said quietly, surprising everyone, including himself. "Several times, Mrs. Parker tried to explain who she was, but she was interrupted. She mentioned her husband, but no one listened." Isabel shot him a withering glance, but the young man continued, something like conviction strengthening his voice. "She tried to explain, but no one was listening." Sebastian, unwilling to be sidelined in the unfolding drama, rose from his table. "Now, see here. The woman was clearly underdressed for an establishment of this caliber. Rules exist for a reason." Michael turned to face him fully. "Mr. Hammond, I'm curious. What exactly do you believe makes someone worthy of respect?" The question hung in the air, deceptively simple yet devastating in its directness. Sebastian blinked, caught off guard. "Well, obviously certain standards must be maintained," he blustered. "People work hard to achieve a certain position in life, and with that comes certain privileges." "Interesting," Michael replied. "My wife works with children who have nothing. She teaches art to help them express trauma they can't put into words. She sits on boards that determine how millions in charitable funds are distributed." His voice remained conversational, yet it carried to every corner of the now silent restaurant. "She chooses to dress practically because her work is about substance, not appearance." Ella squeezed Michael's arm gently. This display wasn't his usual style. Michael typically avoided confrontation, preferring to let his work speak for itself. But tonight, watching the righteous indignation in his eyes, she was reminded of why she had fallen in love with him all those years ago. "Michael," she said softly, "it's really okay." He looked at her, his expression softening. "It's not okay, Ella. Not just because of you, but because of how many others they've probably treated this way. People who don't have the privilege of walking back in and exposing their prejudice." Catherine stepped forward, desperation now evident in her manner. "Mr. Parker, please allow us to make this right. We can discuss this privately in my office." Michael turned back to her, his composure intact but his resolve evident. "Make it right? I don't think you understand what's happened here. This isn't about getting a table now that you know who we are. It's about the fact that you believe some people deserve basic dignity and respect, while others don't. Several diners shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the entertainment they had expected with their expensive meals, not this mirror being held up to reflect the ugly side of exclusivity. From across the room, an elderly couple rose from their table. The woman, elegant in her understated evening wear, made her way over to Ella and Michael. "You're absolutely right," the woman said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of Boston society. She turned to face the restaurant staff. "My husband and I have been dining here for 20 years. We've watched this place change from a restaurant that valued character to one that values only appearances and connections. Tonight has confirmed what we've suspected for some time." Her husband joined her, nodding in agreement. "We won't be returning," he added simply. Sebastian, realizing the tide was turning against him, attempted to salvage his position. "Now, Margaret," he said to the elderly woman, "surely you're overreacting. Standards must be maintained or else—" "Or else what, Richard?" Margaret challenged. "Or else we might have to judge people by their character rather than their clothing." Sebastian blinked. What a terrible thought. Thomas stepped forward again, removing his server's jacket. "I quit. I've been uncomfortable with how we profile guests for months, but tonight crossed a line I can't support." Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. "Thomas, don't be ridiculous. Think about your career." "I am," he replied simply, placing his jacket on the reception desk. Ella watched this cascade of consequences with mixed emotions. She hadn't wanted this, hadn't intended to disrupt so many lives or create such a scene. Yet perhaps this moment of reckoning was overdue. "Michael," she said quietly, "let's go home." Michael nodded, knowing that spectacle had never been Ella's style. As they turned to leave, Catherine made one desperate final plea. "Mr. Parker, please, your reservation for your anniversary. We would be honored to host you. Complimentary, of course." Michael paused at the door, turning back to face the restaurant. The patrons, the staff, Sebastian, all waited for his response. "The purpose of our anniversary dinner," he said finally, "was to celebrate love, growth, and values that matter. I'm afraid those values are incompatible with what this establishment represents." As they stepped outside into the evening air, Ella slipped her hand into Michael's. "That was quite a scene," she said, a smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Too much?" he asked suddenly, uncertain. Ella considered this for a moment. "No," she decided. "Not too much. Sometimes the world needs to be reminded that worth isn't determined by appearances." As they walked toward Michael's Porsche, neither noticed the young server Thomas exiting the restaurant behind them. He called out hesitantly, "Mr. and Mrs. Parker?" They turned, surprised. "I just wanted to say," he began, then gathered his courage. "What happened in there wasn't right. And well, I'd like to thank you for standing up. Not just for Mrs. Parker, but for all the others who have been treated that way but couldn't do anything about it." Michael smiled, extending his hand. "Thank you for speaking the truth, Thomas. That takes real courage." "Do you have other plans?" Ella asked suddenly. "No, ma'am," Thomas replied, confusion evident on his face. "Then join us for dinner," she offered. "We know a wonderful little Italian place where they judge the food, not the guests." As the three walked away from the Crystal Palace, the weight of the evening's confrontation lifted. Behind them, through the restaurant's windows, Catherine could be seen addressing her staff with urgent gestures. Isabel sat at her station, shoulders slumped, and Sebastian stood alone at his table, the center of attention he'd so craved, now focused on him for all the wrong reasons. Her studio illuminated, particles of dust dancing in the air. This was her sanctuary, a place where worth was measured by intention and effort, not appearances or status. The door opened quietly, and Michael entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one near Ella, careful not to disturb her work, then leaned against the wall to watch her skilled hands transform formless clay into something beautiful. The board approved Thomas's proposal, Michael said after a comfortable silence. Full funding for the Community Arts Initiative. Ella sonrió sin levantar la vista de su rueda. I had a feeling they would. He has a natural talent for seeing potential where others don't. After that night at the Crystal Palace, Thomas had reached out to Ella about his long-held dream of creating accessible arts programs in underserved communities. With her guidance, he'd developed a proposal for the Parker Innovation Foundation, transforming his experience in the service industry into valuable insights about breaking down barriers to participation. "Did you see the article?" Michael asked, sipping his coffee. Ella asintió. The Boston Globe's feature on the Crystal Palace had created quite a stir in the city's dining scene. Not because it exposed what had happened to Ella, she had specifically asked that her name be kept out of it, but because it sparked a broader conversation about exclusivity, judgment, and the invisible barriers that divided people. "Victoria called again," Michael added. "Third time this week." After the incident, Victoria had left the Crystal Palace. Her departure was part of the restaurant's very public commitment to re-examine its values. Her heartfelt letter of apology to Ella had been unexpected, not just expressing regret for that one evening, but acknowledging a pattern of behavior she was now working to change. "Maybe we should talk to her," Ella suggested, her hands still working the clay. "Everyone deserves a chance to grow." Michael smiled at his wife's characteristic compassion. "You never cease to amaze me. You know that? After how she treated you?" Ella aclaró, finalmente mirando hacia arriba desde su trabajo. "It's not about forgetting what happened, Michael. It's about choosing how that experience shapes us moving forward. Victoria might become a powerful advocate against the very thinking she once embodied." Michael nodded in understanding. This was why he had fallen in love with Ella in the first place, her ability to see beyond the surface, to find potential for good in the most unlikely places. It was what made her work with children so transformative, what made her presence on foundation boards so valuable, and what made her his moral compass when success threatened to distort his perspective. "We still haven't decided where to celebrate our anniversary," Michael reminded her. Their actual anniversary was just 2 days away. Ella's hands stilled on the clay. "Actually, I have an idea about that."